Welcome back and thanks for staying with us. You're still watching Rapid On right here on Rapid Television. Right now it's time for the big conversation. My name is Victor. Okay.
My name is Martha Alu. Welcome to the 9 o'clock conversation right here on Rapid Television.
And of course, on the big conversation today, we are looking at a situation that raises important questions about law enforcement, political authority, and institutional independence in Nigeria. Now, when questions of law enforcement arise, they often go beyond the courtroom and into the heart of governance itself. Also, when a law enforcement agency takes action, the expectation is simple, that it is acting according to the law without fear or favor. But what happens when the president steps in? And this is a question that is now at the center of debate following the president's intervention in the dispute between the EFCC and the Osun State government. Now, the EFCC had obtained a court order freezing the state government's account, but President Bola Tinubu subsequently directed the EFCC to approach the court to vacate that freezing order. And the president also expressed concern about the timing of the action coming days before the August 15 governorship election in Osun State. Well, that intervention has now raised a bigger question. How independent are Nigeria's law enforcement agencies? Can the president direct an agency like the EFCC in an ongoing matter? And where does presidential authority end? And where does the independence of a law enforcement agency begin? And perhaps, most importantly, can Nigerians trust these institutions to enforce the law without political influence? And that is our focus on the big conversation today. And joining us is Barrister Justice Ojiono, a legal practitioner. Barrister, good morning and welcome to the conversation.
Good morning to you, Mr. Parker, and good morning to you, Ms. Alu, and to all our viewers all across the world. It's my pleasure to join you. I must say here, before we continue the conversation, at least about 2 weeks ago, the CJN came out to say that it shouldn't put Barrister. But again, it doesn't apply to you. I don't know. I don't want to say on national TV that you are free to do it because you are not one of the persons that it is addressed to. But again, I may not be able to freely call another person Barrister. So.
All right. Thank you very much. But of course, now before we even discuss the EFCC matter, let's establish this foundation. In Nigeria's constitutional arrangement, is the president the boss of every institution under the executive arm?
Yes, with some level of rider, and I'm going to say yes with some level of rider because we must revisit the provisions of Section 130 of our Constitution that makes the president practically the CEO and chairman of the executive arm and the armed forces of Nigeria. So why I said I can say yes and I can say no, we must remember that judicial powers is concentrated amongst all judicial officers in Nigeria. Legislative powers is concentrated amongst 109 senators and 360 House of Reps members. But executive powers in one person, so it is very, very awesome. The only rider is that to an extent the Constitution tries to distance some agencies of government. For example, INEC, even though it's an executive arm of government, the chairman, for example, has some security of tenure of office, and when it comes to its own budget, too, he has some level of independence. So that's where the rider eventually ends. But generally, when it comes to, in context, the EFCC and similar organizations, the president is the alpha and omega, and without any rider, he can eventually call the shot. Sometimes he can choose to do it using the chief law officer pursuant to Section 150 of our Constitution, the Attorney General of the Federation, or using Section 174 rights, Section 175 rights, which talks about the fact that the Attorney General can practically commence, continue, and discontinue a criminal process, and the presidential power to amnesty in Section 175. Bar all these ones, the president is the alpha and omega when it comes to the administration of criminal law in Nigeria.
So you're saying that the president was acting within his powers?
Yes. He has operational control in the manner of speaking of the EFCC. The EFCC chairman is a political appointee, and it is even easy for you to be it's easier for you to be a political appointee in the US than in Nigeria. In Nigeria, you have to practically be a bootlicker. I can't use some words on national TV. In in Nigeria, you are worse. If you are appointed by a Nigerian politician, they are emperors in a manner of speaking. You have to wake up and be calling them Alpha and Omega and be doing rankadede to your political appointers every single day in order for you to be able to remain and keep the office. So with respect to the EFCC chairman and the decision that he or his subordinates made in that case, they are smaller than a fry. When we are talking about small fries, when we talk about the size of fishes in the ocean.
All right. Now, you have said that the president has the constitutional backing to make that decision or make that call that he did make last week regarding Osun State. But you see, other political opponents have come out to speak about this. In fact, most prominently will be that of Atiku Abubakar, making the comparison between what we see in Osun State and that which happened in the case of Malam Nasir El-Rufai. And in his own direct words, he says, if the president can issue direct operational directive to the EFCC on Osun whenever he considers it expedient, why hasn't the same intervention been extended to other prominent, long-running investigations that are currently ongoing here in Nigeria? It is only a fair test of consistency, according to Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, not a call to relitigate any specific cases. What do you make of this comparison that he has made between Malam Nasir's case and the Osun State's case?
There's really nothing in the. A politician will always speak and choose. They always do exactly as it suits their political interests. And by this, I'm referring to the president. They will pick and choose the law. They will cherry pick and choose the laws that they want to enforce at the time they want the rule of law to actually hold free. And all, we must remember that under Buhari, it was who said that, I think Buhari, a combination of Buhari and Malami, they always say that even the rule of law, some things are higher than the rule of law in this country. And we must also perpetually remember the words of Justice Nikki Toby in the case of Buhari and INEC when he was telling the judicial officers to stay far from politicians, because the stock in trade of the judicial officer is to not be biased, but the stock in trade of the politician is to be extremely biased. So when the president acts in a particular way with respect to one situation and acts completely diametrically opposed in other ways, it shows that they are just politicians. If Mr. with due respect, Atiku is in the same position, I want to dare speculate as a gambling man, if I am one, that he too would have behaved exactly in the same way because he is a politician. And according to the eternal words of Nikki Toby, he will be biased too.
Where does that leave us? Because you're saying now the president can decide who he wants to revisit this matter, relitigate, who he wants to pardon. Where does that leave us as a people? Because the judiciary is supposed to be a system or a symbol of justice, which means that whatever happens to party A should most likely be what happens to party B. How do we manage this kind of fairness in the judicial system with what you have explained now as the constitutional right of the president?
Okay, for me, it is beyond the judiciary, it's beyond the judicial system. It is much more of a constitutional matter. Okay. Because it is the constitution that created both the president and the presidency and created the judiciary, also to sections 5 and 6 of our constitution, that actually gives them specific power. And if you follow cases like Marbury and Madison, you will know that not too much the judicial review. Everybody should just maintain their spheres of influence. There should not be judicial rascality. No judge should come up and say, oh, the president does not have this power, when the primary default position of a judge is to interpret the law as it is written. Much more the provision of our ultimate law, which is the Constitution. So if the Constitution already gives the president such power, there is very, very little the judiciary can do. Major thing we can do, and of course, if you follow the case of Ilori and State, is that we have to use public opinion to hold the president accountable. I like what Mr. Atiku is saying. We as Nigerians too, and you too, pursuant to your Section 22 powers as the fourth estate of the realm, should also ensure that we are drumming it in the ears of the president that you cannot do this in this case and be doing exactly the opposite in that case. That seems to be the only way we can hold the president accountable and make him a course correct when it comes to actions like this.
Now, of course, one of the reasons, the major reason the president did give, was that he was concerned that the timing of the EFCC action was just coming days before the Osun State governorship election, and that he said that could create the impression that federal institutions were being used to influence electoral process in Osun State. Now, here's my question. Is concern about the appearance of political appearance by itself a sufficient reason for a president or for the president to intervene in an EFCC matter? An ongoing case, rather.
I will walk a fine line while answering this. I actually feel that since the EFCC has the opportunity to actually conduct the investigation way earlier or slightly immediately after the election, I think they should have exercised some level of discretion. I solidly think that they ought to have exercised some level of discretion and not just a few days before the election, because the optics is going to be very, very, very bad. So I feel that that might be a good reason. I love the EFCC a lot. We work together a lot, but on this, I think they really, really misfire. But having said that, we would also have to say that if it is an existential situation, I don't know what, of course, we talked about the fact that they are investigating and all.
Yeah.
If it's an existential thing that cannot wait until after the election, I feel that, yes, they were right in going before the election and also close to the election, but they have to show that it is really, really existential, and the potential for being able to get correct a result from the investigation that can guarantee prosecution and conviction would have been erased. Maybe they would have been right to have done it, but if all these situations would have still been preserved, you can still investigate even after the election, and you still be able to get a conviction after the election. There is no danger to evidence after the election. Then you didn't have to have done it at this time, because what you stand to lose in optics and confidence of the Nigerian people in that institution is significantly greater than what you gain from one or two convictions.
All right. Now, I'll take us back a bit to, the conversation about independence and jurisdiction that we started off with. In Nigeria's anti-corruption architecture, the EFCC, the ICPC, and the NDLEA sits at the executive branch of government, right? And you see, can an anti-corruption agency be exactly independent of a president who is responsible for appointing the chairman of the agency, who is responsible for the budget of such agency? Or is independence in the name of these agencies aspirational rather than legal? Help us talk it through.
I don't even think that they can even rise to the totem of aspiration. They cannot even aspire to it. They cannot even.
Why so?
It is that. It is very, very bad, because we have, beyond just the names, the words they decide to put in the name, we have seen them operationally. We have seen the way they operate, and there have been a huge disappointment. I don't want to drop in it. Okay, let me even take this step. If the former Kogi State governor, for example, is still sitting pretty and still calling the shots, and is not really heavily being prosecuted, is about to become a senator of Nigeria. Of course, even the Senate president himself. Tell me one major politician that is not under investigation. Just tell me one that is not. Of course, some of them have made public reportages and some of them have not made public reportages. And we know that some more are even going to be prosecuted, very, very, at least paraded They will be prosecuted very, very soon. What is the result that we have been able to achieve? What are been the scores against the Nigerian politicians, especially the big thieves who are practically plundering our Commonwealth blind? We have been able to convict just two governors from the inception of the EFCC, for example, and the ICPC. And what is the fate of those two governors that have been convicted? They have collected presidential pardons, and they are practically probably enjoying themselves in some remote holiday island in the Bahamas as we speak. So I feel that it's just a charade. It's just so that, okay, they are able to pick up one or two Yahoo boys who are small fries who can also look for a way to buy their ways out of trouble, maybe by hiring good lawyers or maybe doing one or two things that unfortunately happens in some of these law enforcement bodies. So I feel that as much as possible, the effect of the EFCC, for example, yes, they have had some good scores when it comes to recovery and all, but of course there is also the fact that what they recovered can also be plundered. I pray that that's been corrected. I heard that a lot of steps have been taken in order to ensure that doesn't exactly repeat itself in the broad way it happened, especially in the last administration. But generally, I feel that what the signs that were shown to me, to some of us, that maybe a Yahya Bello has been significantly and properly dealt with. I feel that maybe EFCC would have been able to regain some level of its currency of confidence. But again, I feel that they lost it to respect to that. Maybe if they can pull off another one that is not political, that is not partisan, we'll be able to know that, oh, maybe EFCC is getting another chance of redeeming itself. And of course, as we pray, how they are able to redeem themselves, it is for the general good of the Nigerians. And this time, they shouldn't be telling us the thousands and tens of thousands of people that they have successfully convicted, which is one or two boys who stole one small amounts. I'm not encouraging little thievery or small thievery. I'm just saying, take one person, for example, the Accountant General of the Federation stole more than 80 billion naira. So I think it's more than 80 billion naira. Malami is said to have stolen more than 200 billion. Yahya Bello is said to have stolen more than 80 billion. Now the three of them have stolen more than half a trillion naira. The recovery is made so far from the former CBN governor. It's almost half a trillion naira. So I just mentioned 4 people off my head now, but just the 4 of them have more than 1 trillion naira amongst them. How is this country even surviving? How is this country surviving? Just 4 out of tens of thousands of political appointees. Just 4. Between 4 of them, they have more than 1 trillion naira. Our budget in this country for this year is about 50-something trillion naira. If 4 people have, and this tells you that even the amount that we are budgeting, there are a lot of money that don't go into the consolidated revenue fund, that don't go into our federal account. Because if these monies are recoverable from these people, how is Nigeria even still surviving?
Well, these are basic questions that are begging for answers as well. But let's come back to the crux of the matter here, because institutions or agencies like the EFCC, ICPC, they're being described as independent agencies. But can an institution, be called independent when the president has a role in appointing its leadership?
Yes, definitely. I feel that yes, to an extent, yes. But again, we must remember that the CJN is also appointed. But the appointment of the CJN is not a la carte, as the president can just pick and choose essentially anybody from the street. And of course, they also will have to meet the minimum requirements provided in the EFCC Act, EFCC Establishment Act. And I deliberately said minimum requirements because it is so easy to meet. The threshold is so low that anybody can actually put any of his cronies can be put there. So that is the president appointing. The president also appoints the CJN, but the buffet from which he has to make a choice from, his hands are practically twisted because he must as per the Constitution, choose the most senior justice of the Supreme Court, just like what happens also in the states too, where they have to choose the most senior judge in the hierarchy of their judicial service per state. Of course, Imo State is always trying to defeat that constitutional purpose, unfortunately. And so it's the president that appoints the CJN, but the process has been rigged by the Constitution and deliberately so, while the Establishment Act of the EFCC too just made it a la carte for the president with respect to the EFCC and ICCC and other organizations like that. So my own call will be that, yeah, it will still be an executive body, but the mode of at least presenting the choice to the president, his hand should be forced. It shouldn't be allowed to just pick anybody that he chooses, which always by coincidence, and I'm not just referring to this president, always by coincidence, their surnames are usually similar. The EFCC chairman's surname, they are usually from the same exact neck of the wood. So it is a shame that the police, like the police inspector general of police, mention any other relevant, important agency of the government. We just see that their son is just shopping of similar surnames. And one thing their spinners will come out to say is that, no, it is not nepotism. No, it's not cronyism and things like that, insulting our intelligence like we are people of the worst level of IQs in this country. So I feel that, yes, circling back to the question, the president very well can make the choice. It should still be an executive arm of the government, but his hands should be almost as completely tied or even more completely tied than the way with respect to the CJN and other relevant similar offices. And also the tenure of office of these people should also be guaranteed. It should not be easy for the president to fire them. I would have ordinarily said that, yes, they should be, the Senate too should be made to participate and approve the firing before the president can fire. But unfortunately, we have a situation in this country now where even the Senate or the House of Reps has become a complete rubber stamp, what I personally call rank-a-dede Senate. There is nothing that the president wants that cannot pass through the Senate in half a day. It doesn't have to, 24 hours is too much. Wherever they are in the world, they will assemble like he's their Lord and Savior, like he's their King and God, thereby defeating the eternal principles, the principles that have really, really worked, which is called the separation of powers. Our Constitution recognizes separation of powers. The legislature is section 4 of our Constitution. Their job is to make the law that the executive in section 5 will have to act on. So the legislature is supposed to be supreme because if there is no law passed by the legislature, we won't have anything for the executive to execute. But unfortunately, it has been turned completely upside down, and it is a shame that we now have a situation where the president can practically ask for the head of anybody on the platter, and the legislature, they will just jump and say how high I'm provided for this.
So with all of this being explained, would you say that these agencies are truly independent on their own?
They are not. They are not. They are far from it. It is impossible with the way our laws are presently schemed for them to ever be.
All right. Now, there's a particular inconsistency in the matter that I think that a lot of conversation centered around this has left out. And I think Atiku Abubakar did point out this inconsistency. The first is EFCC's public defense never mentioned a court order. In fact, when it was first said that the account of Osun State government was frozen, they never mentioned a court order. But you see, the president's justification of reversing it rests on one. As a lawyer, does this concern you? And does it change your reading on what actually happened in Osun State or regarding Osun State?
Yes, for me, I feel that it is very, very unfortunate. And you know, one of the things that if you are used to the American system a lot, especially the legal system and the government system, one of the things they will usually tell you, I think they cite section 14, Article 14 of their Constitution, maybe 14th Amendment or something like that.
Right.
And they usually talk about procedure. procedure. If you don't follow the right procedure in the US, you arrest somebody, you slap somebody before you take his phone, or you illegally go into the house without a warrant to take the phone. You can't use the phone in evidence, but also under Section 14, you can. And we're a country, also under Section 14 of our Evidence Act, we can. We're a country that we don't follow procedure. Let me tell you how the president ought to have done it in order for there not to even be any furore at all. One, the president ought to have just authorized the Attorney General. The Attorney General has Section 174 power to actually discontinue a criminal procedure, a procedure that eventually started. That's number one. The president can also instruct the EFCC, if indeed it had filed a case, to withdraw it with immediate effect. That's number two. So I feel that if those were not followed, whether it's a civil procedure, whether it's a criminal procedure, then it will be the president practically jumping the gun and insulting the judiciary by reversing the order of the court, if indeed an order had been given. And it's unfortunate that in this country, we have a history of getting overnight court judgments. It is very, very unfortunate. I say it is my constituency. It's not something I'm particularly happy about, but again, it didn't start now. During the 1992-1993 election, there were overnight judgments to annul the election. We also saw something similar in Malame's rule of law under the Buhari government, with the way they founded Supreme Court justices and the CJN, and they went to get an affidavit. They went to get an order of court that no lawyer practically put his name to. No seal, so a lot of things can actually be able. They got it from the code of conduct. I mean, a lot of things can be done in this country, unfortunately, overnight. Also using some of their accomplices in the judiciary. So when the FCC said, "Oh, there is no court order," they have a right to actually, they have a 3-day right or 2-day right to be able to do it, even barring a court order. And the president comes and says there was a court order. Any of it can be explained away using the way our system is really rigged. And it is very, very unfortunate. It is something I strongly frown at. It is something I'm not happy with. The optics of it is bad. The legals of it is bad. If indeed there was no court order before the president said what he said, and if even there was a court order before the president said what he said, the president, because there is an active judicial procedure going on, which has not been vacated legally, whether on the criminal front or on the civil front, I feel that it is all shades of wrong for the president to have taken such a step and to have stopped such a process.
All right. So I just want to ask, if let's say that EFCC did not obtain any legal backings from the court before they embarked on this freezing spree that they did with the Osun State government account, what is the legal implication of that to the EFCC? That's one. Secondly, we now know that Osun State have established a suit against EFCC and demanding 2 billion naira paid to them in damages. What is the legal extent of that backing if EFCC actually got a court warrant for the freezing of those accounts?
Okay, I'm sorry, with respect to the second question, I may not be able to touch it even with a long hold because it said it has been filed. But since it has been filed, I'm required to not talk on it, so I don't preempt the court.
All right.
It's against the ethics of my profession. But if indeed it had not been filed, circling back to your question one, if it had not been filed and EFCC goes ahead with that, we usually say there are 2 lawyers, 3 opinions. So my opinion may not be something that will be accepted, especially because it contains some level of argument and dispute. I feel generally, they cited a provision of the EFCC Act and things like the Money Laundering Act and blah, 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 blah. I feel that we have to go back to the days where the judiciary used to uphold these provisions and say that powers to punish, for example, powers to punish belong to the judiciary. No executive arm of government can hold it for themselves. For example, to freeze an account is a form of punishment. The right to property that is given to Section 43 and 44 of our Constitution given to the average Nigerian also rests with the government, because the government essentially is a living thing, is a living being. So the right to property, just like the right to life as contained in Section 33, should not be taken or deprived of any Nigerian, whether it's a natural person or an artificial person like the government, without the judiciary looking into it and intervening in it. So that would be my own argument in court. There is no earth on which I will agree that the EFCC has the power to actually stop a person's right to property. A person's right, just imagine, nobody will ever, no Nigerian least under the influence of my voice will be happy at all when you approach your bank and they tell you that, oh, it has been frozen by the EFCC or any other organization without you having committed any crime. It is very, very wrong, and there is no way I, as a legal practitioner, especially tilting towards human rights, will ever agree with this awesome demonstration of the power of the federal government. What the Americans call the Fed. They said, so there is no way I will give my imprimatur to that. I can never endorse it. I can never agree with it. Before the EFCC can freeze anybody's account, whether it is the government or it is an individual, they should ensure that they argue before an unbiased, and my emphasis is before an unbiased judge, not one of the judges that are in their pockets where they can just get these things overnight. They should argue before an unbiased judge and let an unbiased judge be able to check the affidavit and be satisfied that, oh, the fact that I've been deposed to by the EFCC is satisfactory enough before they will give such a very, very painful and harrowing order. So that essentially is my take on this point.
All right. Help us bring some clarity to this matter as well, because some Nigerians may hear that the president directed the EFCC to vacate the order. I'm talking about, of course, the Osun State case here. And then they might conclude that the president can simply cancel a court order. Now, can the president legally set aside a court order, or must the agency, as reported, go back to the same court and ask the court to vacate it?
Okay, it's the latter, actually. The president cannot vacate. The president is a member of the executive arm. If the judicial process has been set ruling, there are only two ways to actually stop it. It is either the Attorney General discontinues the suit,
okay,
or the president or the governor, as the case may be, depending on whether it's a state or federal crime, waits until the conclusion of the case before he uses his power to his amnesty, various kinds of amnesty powers, whether they are committing, whether they are outrightly giving pardons, presidential pardons, and things like that. And of course, it's not only unique to Nigeria; it is also on the international level. So while the matter is still ongoing, it is the Attorney General or the agency, as the case may be.
All right.
But after the conclusion of the matter, it is either the president or the governor, depending on whether it is state or federal crime.
But we've been speaking with Justice Ojono, a legal practitioner. We've been talking about the situation in Osun State. Of course, they recall that the EFCC had obtained, according to them, a court order to freeze the account of the Osun State government. And of course, the president did give an order stating that the EFCC has got to go back to the court and vacate that particular order, citing that it is going to maybe mean that there was an interference by the federal government on this particular matter. But of course, it's been an interesting conversation here, getting to get the legal meaning, of course, the legal clarity on this particular subject matter. We'll go out on a very quick break. When we'll come back, we continue with the conversation. Welcome back, and thanks for being here with us. You're still watching Rapid On right here on Rapid Television. Of course, this is the big conversation, and we've been talking about the intervention by the president telling the EFCC to get onto the court and vacate the order freezing the account of the Osun State government. And our guest has been Justice Ojono, a legal practitioner who has given us, legal insight to the matter. But of course, back to myself and Martha here. This has been the situation going on in the country. The independence of the agencies. We did ask the legal practitioner earlier, talk about the independence of the EFCC, talk about the independence of the ICPC, and of course he has stated, from his submission that we have an institutional weakness as it is. And for me, I always ask, if we already know that there's an institutional weakness there, what then are the practical steps, that needs to be taken to ensure that, this institutional weakness can actually be looked into, and this can now be, the solution can be brought on board so that we don't get back to this situation every single time. But of course, off air, we're having a conversation and you were sharing a few thoughts.
Well, my issue with Nigerians mostly is they don't ask the right questions. We rant a lot. Once there's an issue in the social space, everybody just wants to jump on it and everybody just wants to have a conversation about it. But think about it like this. There is a flaw in a system, and that flaw in a system allows you to get $1,000 every day. How many Nigerians will actually call and pick that out as a flaw? We are dragging the president. Oh, the president has no right. The president has the right to do that.
Constitutional right.
Constitutional rights to do that. And he used his power based on the Constitution. So the concern of Nigerians should not be what the president did with a power that is legally assigned to him. It's how we can cause a reform institutionally and constitutionally that can help check or veto, whichever one we like, the powers that are being assigned constitutionally to the president. We have all known that, there are three arms of the government, there's legislature, the executive, but they relate with each other, right? So at what point does crossing from the executive arm to the legal arm now becomes a breach or crossing your jurisdiction of power? So the issue was never the president. The issue was the powers that allowed the president to make that decision. Because the truth is, if one person deserves that, or is giving that, another person deserves that. Because the law is about fairness. It's about justice. It's about making sure that everybody has a fair playing ground. But if you give one person a fair playing ground, and because you have the power to, you decide not to give another, what does that say about the justice system here of Nigeria? So this is not a person problem. It is a constitutional problem. It's a fundamental issue. And Nigerians should redirect their energy to asking, how can we cause a reform in the institution and in the Constitution that can bring about proper checks and balances, especially when it comes to the usage of power for certain offices. And our guest has already helped us to break this down, from a legal perspective, what he thinks and what he sees about the matter now on ground. It's a good thing that the president asked that matter be vacated, because it was actually very poor timing. Now, even if the president has no hand in it, even though APC had no hand in it, it will automatically circle back to them.
Definitely.
Because they are the major opposition for the election in Osun State. So it is looking like punishment, or is serving as frustration to make sure that you don't get to the points where you need to get to for the governorship election. So I think these dynamics need to be worked on. As Nigerians, or as a country, we need to be able to strengthen the judiciary to be able to stand on its own and make certain decisions. And it's a long walk, honestly. It's going to be a long walk.
I also need to get to that point where agencies, departments, and institutions that are said to be independent can truly be independent, of both the president and other political powers that might be. With that being said, this is all we're going to be taking on the segment of the program this morning. Do remember that you can follow us across all social media pages, across our platforms at Rapid TV, and you can get to watch our episodes, all our episodes, on our YouTube platform, which is at Official Rapid TV, and our website www.arabianradiotv.com allows you to watch us anywhere in the world. And of course, we have a new addition, which is the Free TV. All you need to do is download the Free TV app on your phone and search for Rapid Television, and we're going to be right there with you every single time of the day. My name is Victor. Okay.
My name is Martha Alu. Thank you for joining us today on the show. We will see you tomorrow.